Wonderful. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to Programmatic Approaches to Open Research Support, offered by the ACRL Digital Scholarship Section's Open Research Discussion Group, with special thanks to Elois Sharp from ALA for helping us set up and record this session. I'm Rele Kern. I'm one of the co-conveners of the Open Research Discussion Group, and I'll be hosting today's session. And I'm joined by Open Research Discussion Group co-convener Brianna Marshall, who will be monitoring your questions in our chat pod. We're fortunate today, we have two fabulous lightning talk presentations lined up. We'll ask that you share questions as they occur to you in the chat pod. We'll hear from all of our presenters first, and then we'll save our questions for a question and answer session at the end of today's session. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first set of speakers today, Micah Vandegrift and Tisha Mentnech. Micah Vandegrift's research focuses on evolution of policies and technologies that maximize the dissemination and impact of publicly engaged scholarship. Specifically, he's developing a concept of documentation as a form of scholarly communication and exploring the evolving landscape of evaluating and validating new forms of scholarly output. As NC State University Library's first open knowledge librarian, Micah is dedicated to building programs and processes for the research and learning community to embrace a more open scholarly praxis. He's also the lead principal investigator for visualizing digital scholarship in libraries and learning spaces, funded by a grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. Recently, Micah studied open science policy and infrastructure in the Netherlands and Denmark as a Fulbright Schumann Research Fellow, and previously worked as the Director of Digital Scholarship at Florida State University. And Micah is joined today by Tisha Mentnech, who is the Research Librarian for Life Sciences and Research Metrics at NC State University Libraries. Earlier this year, she, along with colleagues, ran a virtual conference for librarians supporting reproducibility that's proven to be more valuable in the current realm of academia. Tisha works and advocates for ethical data practices, openness, and equitable access to information and transparency. Micah and Tisha will be presenting on first of a kind, open curriculum, agriculture, and workflows. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Micah and Tisha.
Great, thank you so much. So as Verletta had mentioned, Micah and I are going to be presenting on First of a Kind, on a project that we've been working on with a colleague, and where it's going and where it's not going with the new COVID that is taking over. Micah, would you like to talk about our abstract?
Yeah, I'm sure that you all saw this either in emails or in registering, but I just wanted to highlight that the 2 points that we hope to hit on, and these can come back in questions also, is our role in this project as consulting and advising, which I think is a little different. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then also how we are utilizing this project to think about developing and establishing workflows for digital scholarship broadly, but also the bigger umbrella of whatever library support of projects is.
Cool. And so one of the things we wanted to talk about was our background and how we got to where we are now, supporting a land-grant institution of NC State University. So for me, I actually have a background in health sciences librarianship. I had started it in 2015 through 2019. And then as this position that I'm in now opened at NC State, I am in that now, supporting life sciences as well as research metrics. For me, I have been a child of collaborative extension, which is something that land-grant institutions have across the state. They help with 4-H and other programs like SNAP and WIC. And so for me, I wanted to find ways that the library could better support extension and the land-grant mission that we have.
Yeah, and so from my background, as you can see, is pretty slim. I was at Florida State for a long time, working mostly in the areas of scholarly communication and digital scholarship. So thinking about open access, institutional repositories, copyrights, and then as digital scholarship developed over the last 5-7 years, including things like data management, digital humanities, project development, and so it's a bit of a shift for me to be now at a STEM focused and agriculture focused university. So some of our presentation will talk about what we learned from our past experiences and how we're bringing that to bear on a new kind of university that we're working at.
So as this started, I started back last May, and then one of my first things that I was able to attend was a international symposium on agriculture informatics. And one of the people that I got to meet there was Dr. Natalie Nelson. She is a doctor here at NC State, and she is in the Biosystems Analytics Lab. And one of the programs that she talked about during that session was her pigs, poultry, and the planet and data-driven problem solving, which I'll continue to refer to as P4. What this is a program for undergraduate students to understand data sciences and how that can relate to agriculture, and in this specific one, pigs and poultry. As part of this program, the students got a background and understanding of statistics and how those can be applied in the field of data science. And during the presentation at this symposium, Dr. Nelson proposed that she wanted to then make this so that other people could have access to it. She got to meet with other extension agents in the state of North Carolina that would also be interested in this and how to use data science in their everyday work. So during the Q&A session, I kind of darted my hand up and I was like, would you like to make this an OER? This is a really great project. There were other people there who were more interested in this in an industry way and trying to capitalize off of it. But I wanted to quickly ask if it could be made something that could be openly available, because I can see how this is really helpful for people just beyond undergraduates and those who are in the industry. So that was where this all came about. And then I met with Micah because it was the next best step of we're both new. This is a project of OERs and all of that Mike is interested in, and then the data science and then ag side that I am interested in, to kind of come together and see how can we make this systematic and usable for Dr. Nelson.
Yeah, so after Tisha made that connection with Natalie, she and I met, like she mentioned, and we started to conceptualize what open science could look like at NC State. There's a pretty well-established initiative on campus that they call the public science. It's a faculty cluster hire, so they call it leadership in public science. So there's a little bit of what we could pull from public science into what we wanted to do with this project. But we also wanted to introduce and start to talk more fervently about the need for open, and that this would really be an open project. One of the strange things about coming from Florida State for me to NC State is that open is kind of seen as a default. There's a lot of people here who publish openly, who release their data, work on open source software, especially in the ag and engineering areas, which are big here. So we didn't have to do so much of the convincing that open is a solution, but to say, how do we do open? So this frame that you see in front of you here is a concept that we're working on and developing, and this project is an example of that. That open science isn't just sharing your data and making and releasing preprints, but it's really about people and projects and connecting those things in community. So some of the work that we started to do in preparation was we wanted to think about what we had learned from our previous roles and then how to apply that into this new context. So for example, I am inspired by and I've read a lot about digital scholarship project management, and especially Jen Vinopal's work, the citation you see on the screen there. So we started to do our, if I was a good digital scholarship librarian, I would do this first. So I was outlining the scope and thinking about what's out of scope for the project. Agreeing on what we're actually going to do, who's doing what when, and then defining some shared common language. So for example, when Natalie talks about this project, the P4, the training data science for agriculture students, she calls it an open curriculum. So we've introduced the phrase open educational resource, and we sort of trade back and forth and aren't really we haven't really decided yet what the thing actually is. So both of those phrases kind of work well, but we had some of those early conversations saying, well, this is how we talk about it from our side, and you're calling it an open curriculum, and that's interesting. Why do you use those words? So applying those concepts, some of what we learned from digital scholarship, common language, scoping, writing things down, what we came out with when we started to apply it to P4 is that this is probably something between an OER and an open science project. I mentioned earlier that when we asked Natalie how we could be most helpful to the project, what we kind of boiled it down to was really that what she needed was just some consultation and advising on best ways to do this. And it became really clear, especially because Natalie's a smart and forward-thinking researcher. This is already a USDA grant that she already has in process, so we're kind of coming in the middle of it, and that she has a really great postdoc named Sheila, who is kind of there to keep this thing moving. The project really doesn't need to be managed, but rather developed, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So we started planning. Just like Jen Vinopal says, I made a Google Drive, started to put some blank documents in there that you see in front of you here, and then we started to have some meetings. The goal of those, this was October through December, the goal of those meetings was to start to establish some of the workflow, think about what we needed to do, how Tisha and I could be most helpful. And the document you see at the bottom there is where we were headed, which was to draft an actual MOU, a Memoranda of Understanding. I went back to the work from our colleagues at UT Arlington, Peace Austin Williams, Brett Currier, and I can't remember the third colleague. Anyway, they have a great resource of how to develop MOUs. So I went back to that and worked with one of our colleagues at NC State named Melissa Weisner to really craft a well-tuned MOU that we were going to present to Natalie and say, okay, here's how we define these terms. So as we were working on that and writing it out, what I realized was that the project scope was twofold. That one, Rafia Mirza, thank you, Brianna. Yes, Rafia Mirza. One aspect of this was that we were going to help Natalie do something, but the other aspect is that, and you can see it underlined there, that we really wanted to establish in the library reusable workflows because we knew there was going to be other examples of this, open curriculum or OER, that don't really fit into any other box. So that became clear as we were going through the MOU and writing the project scope. And you'll see there that the circled project assumption is that everything continues to go well, P4 continues to operate, and obviously got really quickly. Another frame that we're working in a way that we're trying to understand our project development workflow, as we realized that was something that was really important to us, was that we, at the libraries, have lots of people working in lots of different ways, but don't really have a standard sort of pipeline for how projects develop. So something that I got really interested in and sort of pulled Tisha along into was thinking about what could we do with Natalie's project that would help us learn more about this process or create a process for our library. I was really inspired by this article that came out in college and research libraries around the time right before we started working with Natalie, and thought about, and what you see on the screen is the draft of what the workflow would look like. A lot could be solved in the consultative stage where there's a one-on-one consultation, we provide them a tool, and then they sort of exit the workflow. If we move into the collaborative stage, there should probably be an MOU stopping point, agreeing on terms, and that's where I would call it project development. And there's an investment of team and time in the middle there. And then all the way over on the other side is where the thing really becomes a project, where it's a first of a kind, not one of a kind, where what we're building is not just a thing, but really a framework or a system or a model for how we want to continue to do these kinds of projects, because we know that they'll keep coming back. So this was the large frame that we were working in. Very quickly around December, after a holiday break, we realized that we were going to have to pivot. So Tisha didn't mention this, but if you saw on the link at the P4 program, a large part of Natalie's project is taking this group of agriculture students to China to study their agricultural practices, and she has a great working relationship with some of her colleagues there. Obviously, that was canceled very, very early. So the actual implementation of her program is on hold for the time being. Similarly, and of course, as you would all assume, both Natalie and Sheila had shifting priorities. Our priorities in the libraries were changing, and that project pipeline that we just looked at will probably start to slim due to capacity changes in the libraries, in our colleagues, in our time, and et cetera. So we started to think about, really in the last couple of weeks, what are the new opportunities? We hope to be able to report to you today that the project is going well. We have this, here's an output, but we're definitely not there now. So we're still thinking about ways that we can continue on the path toward publishing that curriculum. We have a really great developing partnership with the UNC Press's Office of Scholarly Publishing Services that I'd like to probably utilize to do some of this. And Tisha mentioned that underlying theme of extension. We're doing campus-wide sort of strategic initiative planning, and one of those themes is, what does extension look like in the 21st century? Natalie's project, the P4 project, however it ends up looking over the next 6 or 12 months, I think is a really prime example for extension as like combining skills in data science and working through an organism like the library to publish or share the outputs of those things. So we're thinking about how do we introduce that to the project now. And then also, and this is the key point for us, what can we do even without this project to continue to establish and solidify our own project priorities? How do we take things on? What are the criteria by which we think about where something slots into that workflow? And then how do we deal with the capacity? So this really has boiled down to a lot of questions about process. I'm excited and interested about things like workflows and systems and infrastructure, because everybody seems interested in that, and I want to do what everyone else is doing. But it got really, as I was reflecting on the project in prep for this presentation, I started to ask a lot of questions of really what Natalie needed was a recommendation. It could have been a one-off consultation, and what we sort of imposed on her was a project structure so that we could learn something. Going back, I don't know if I would do that again, so I need to have a sort of a better understanding of when something needs to become a project and when something could really just be, here's a way to publish this open curriculum. Put it in a Git book repository and get a DOI for it. There's some of the questions that you see on the other side of the screen there are, how much of this workflow, this infrastructure, there's a phrase that infrastructure should be invisible until it breaks, but labor shouldn't, and that's a conversation going on in our field. So how much of the process itself should be invisible? How much should we make recommendations to Natalie, and also work with her to understand how things are published, or what does it mean to publish something? this is the middle question that I was just talking about. What's the barometer for just solving the problem? Here's a recommendation of a tool chain that can really help you just do that thing. Or can we work with you to help us learn a lesson? And then this is the kind of question that's underlying a lot of our work on this project, and Tisha and I's work collaboratively together at NC State. I think in our field, we've tended to talk about open science in a different space than digital scholarship, and I don't know if that's actually true or helpful. I don't know what the next biggest, largest umbrella is, maybe just research services or research strategy or whatever we want to call it. But I think that it was pretty clear that applying what we had learned from our previous roles in health sciences and digital scholarship to what is kind of like a core open science OER project, there wasn't really that much distance in the two. So that's all that we had for our time. So I think we hand it to Shilpa now. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Micah and Tisha. Sorry, Shilpa. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you if you
Oh,
want
yes.
to start sharing your slides.
Okay.
And if folks have questions for Micah and Tisha, now's a great time to start dropping those into our chat session. And I am going to pull up my notes here to introduce Shilpa. All right, so Shilpa Rele is the Scholarly Communication and Data Curation Librarian at Rowan University Libraries in Glassboro, New Jersey. And she's been in this role since June of 2017. In this position, Shilpa is responsible for raising awareness about the current issues and challenges related to scholarly communication, advocating for open access, conducting outreach for institutional repository, and establishing a campus-wide collaborative research data management program. Prior to this position, Shilpa was the digital program librarian at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, California. In this position, she provided leadership in the strategic development and growth of LMU's digital collections, institutional repository, and digital scholarship. Shilpa's also worked as the metadata librarian at the University of Miami Libraries, where she was responsible for developing workflows and best practices for metadata for digital collections. Shilpa currently serves as a member of the Digital Library Federation Advisory Committee and the Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resources Steering Committee. Shilpa will be presenting today on Advocating for Open at Rowan University, the Road Ahead. And at this time, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Shilpa.
Thank you, Verletta. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. I am really excited to be here and to share with you the work that I've been doing at Rowan University. I've been at Rowan since June of 2017, so it's only been 2.5 years since I've been there. So today, I was going to give you all an overview of Rowan University and its exponential growth in the last few years, the partnership that the libraries have developed with the Division of University Research. And this will provide some context for some of the work that we are currently doing with regards to open scholarship at our institution. I'll also share some next steps that we've identified, and I would welcome feedback and suggestions for things that we need to think about as we move forward. So Rowan University went from being a state college to a state university to Rowan University after it received a pretty decent donation from Henry M. Rowan. 97 was also the year when the School of Engineering was established. During this time, the university also acquired 2 medical schools. One is the Cooper Medical School and also the Rowan School of Osteopathic Medicine. And I believe we are one of maybe 2 or 3 universities in the US that has 2 medical campuses as part of the larger campus. Because of this acquisition and all of the medical research that is currently underway, the university received an R3 classification in 2017 and an R2 classification in 2018. So there's been a shift in focus towards research in these past few years. There's also been tremendous growth in student enrollment. I believe we have exceeded the 17,000 number as of this year. There's also been a great initiative to hire more research faculty with a growth of more than 100 in the next 5 years. This, of course, was pre-COVID, so I'm interested to see whether they continue with this sort of hiring spree in the coming years. There's also been new and emerging PhD programs that have been created, and there's been an emphasis towards STEM in these years. So this is a slide that our Division of Research shared with us. And as you can see, there has been a considerable increase in the amount of sponsored research that the institution has received. And I believe as of last year, we had received about $60 million. So you can see that the growth trend continues steeply in the upward direction. So given this growth in research funding, as well as the focus on research, the libraries and the Division of University Research have been collaborating on several initiatives and projects over the past few years. We realized that it was imperative to have a representative from this division on our institutional repository committee. This representation has done wonders in terms of promoting the institutional repository to various individuals and stakeholders on campus. They use the platform to manage the back-end workflows for their internal grant applications. They also require faculty who apply for these internal grants to create researcher profiles using our IR platform. We also, the library also has representation on some of the things that the Division of Research does. So they have a Rowan University Research Council, which is at the dean level, in the sense that there are deans and associate deans for research that sit on this council. And the director of research, scholarship and engagement at the library, as well as myself, we sit on this research council. So we get insight into some of the high-level conversations about research that go on at the university. We also participate in the Faculty Research Day, which is organized by this division. And this is basically a day where it's a showcase for faculty research and other collaborations that they have, as well as an opportunity to meet some of the other research stakeholders in the region. In fall of 2018, the manager of proposal development, who's also our representative on the IR committee, we participated in the DLF's e-research network program, and that was very helpful in terms of us thinking about how we wanted to assess what the research data management needs were on campus. So we developed a survey. We shared the results with the deans at the Research Council. We also reached out to IRT, which is our information technology people. And we set up a collaborative effort to determine what sort of research data management needs and services we needed to put in place. We've also partnered on funding for ORCID and Pivot for our faculty. In the fall of 2019, we had an opportunity to review and provide input for the Division of Research's strategic plan, which specifically mentions open scholarship education and training. This is important because the VP for research sits on the president's cabinet. And so having her buy in and also looking at things like, open scholarship is important for moving some of the initiatives along that the library is interested in. This was back in fall of 2018, I think. We offered, the manager of proposal development and we started talking about what are some of the open access requirements for that the federal funding agencies are requiring, and how do we communicate that to the faculty who are interested in applying for grants, but also to generally just raise the level of awareness on campus on some of these things that were being set as requirements. In my conversations with faculty, I also realized that there was confusion over what green open access is, what gold publishing is. And so the two of us decided to partner and offer a workshop on open scholarship. And this was this is a workshop that is offered along with a series of grant workshop that the Division of Research offers in collaboration with the Office of Corporate and Foundation Relations. So this workshop has started to get visibility from a variety of different people. And so the goals of this open scholarship workshop is to set context for the external funding agencies' open access requirements, raising awareness about open access and open scholarship, making them aware of some of the tools and infrastructure that might be available. The fact that my position even exists on campus, some of them are unaware that I can be of help. Highlighting some of the available resources, open resources available at Rowan. So that includes the our institutional repository. We have an open access publishing fund. We have a platform where we can offer faculty the opportunity to start their own open access journals if they wanted to, things like that. And also highlighting, one faculty member and their engagement with open scholarship in their work. And this workshop has been offered once every semester since the spring of 2019. So the other thing that happened earlier this semester, or actually last fall, was the chair of our junior faculty learning community. She's a tenure track faculty member, and she's been organizing this junior faculty learning community for the last few years. But she reached out to inquire if I could talk to the members of this community about research metrics and alt metrics and how to use them effectively and to showcase the impact of a faculty member's scholarship, especially in their tenure and recontracting packets and processes. And so this led to conversations about open access, open tools, publishing, how to identify predatory publishers and things like that. And she felt that the library should take the lead on some of these conversations. So just as an aside, this junior faculty learning community, it offers early career researchers and faculty an opportunity to come talk about teaching, learning, how to have a work-life balance, so what are the requirements for tenure and recontracting, and things like that. So this was I thought this was an interesting opportunity to engage with some of the early faculty members about open scholarship, open access in general. Also happening at the same time were internal discussions at the library about how to advocate for open more broadly at the institution. At the moment, we do not have an open access policy. There are mixed perceptions and attitudes towards open access from both faculty and administrators. And we also realize that we don't really have a pulse on what people are thinking in order to think systematically about what services or infrastructure we can offer to our campus community. So rather than conducting another survey, we decided to bring some faculty together, members from the Division of Research, to try and understand what their needs are, whether it's just whether they need services or whether they just need more education, where the gaps lie and how we could address those needs better. And again, we thought that the library should take a lead on some of these conversations. So we formed the Open Scholarship Discussion Group. It's an informal discussion group. It includes tenure track and tenured faculty members, those who are already doing something or the other with open scholarship, whether it's using open tools, whether it's publishing open access, what have you. And we intentionally decided not to include any campus administrators in this group, just so that we could have more meaningful conversations. There are 2 representatives from our Division of Research who participate in this group. I also reached out to some of the people who had applied and had been awarded funds from the Open Access Publishing Fund. There's, of course, the chair of the Junior Faculty Learning Community. And I serve on the Faculty Senate Research Committee, so I reached out to the chair of this group to see if he would be interested in participating. And I have to say, everybody responded promptly when I wrote to them. And they responded very enthusiastically that they were interested in engaging in these conversations to see how they can help to put some things in place at our institution. There are unfortunately 2 drawbacks that I've noticed so far. We need more participation from humanities and social sciences faculty. And so that's something that I will be working on next to identify who could participate. And so far the conversation has been limited to folks only at our Glassboro campus and not the medical schools. So here are some of the needs that have been identified so far. There needs to be a lot of education and raising awareness of what open access is. People were also confused about what embargoes are, what open reproducible research is, and things like that. And so, this is for me, this is like a golden opportunity to have the library to be the front and center for some of these discussions and initiatives that can be put in place. We also identified some different venues where some of these conversations could be had. There could be at the new faculty orientation. We also have a good relationship with the faculty center at our campus. And so we could partner with them as well to have them offer such sessions with us. We also realized in our discussion that there were, or there are about 4 different groups that are looking at various things as they relate to research and research services. So there's the research council, which is at the dean level. There's the faculty senate research committee. There's a research data management working group that I lead. And then there is a fourth group where, although we've received our R2 Carnegie classification only last year, the university is already talking about becoming an R1. And so they're looking at what it would take to be an R1. And so there's a group that's again looking at what the research needs might be if we were to become an R1. And so we realized that, we need to communicate with all of these groups need to communicate with each other better. It was also expressed that it would be great if the library could intervene in the grant writing process at an early stage. Perhaps develop a checklist for faculty to help them determine whom to contact when, whether it's somebody from the library or from the Division of Research or Information Technology. It was also mentioned that we should have conversations in the future with our faculty senate and also the tenure and recontracting committee, and to think about what sort of incentive structures we have at the moment, what sort of metrics are being used to evaluate scholarship, and how we can reward open scholarship in the future. We also have an OER initiative that is being developed on campus. And so, could we use the institutional repository to include these materials within the platform? In terms of the next steps, we will be identifying some of the more specific needs or issues and then determining ways of how to address them in the future. The idea was also floated that we should develop a faculty learning community on open scholarship for the next academic year and engage even more faculty in these conversations in a more systematic way. Some of the faculty members were interested in understanding what the impact of scholarship has been that has been funded by our Open Access Publishing Fund. And so, with the hope that the fund can be continued in the next fiscal year, given all the uncertainties that this pandemic has caused. But I'd love to hear about what other things we may consider as we move forward. And so I welcome any feedback or suggestions that you have. You can either share it now or you could even email me in the future. So that's all I have for now. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you to all of our speakers. We do have 15 additional minutes, and there are quite a few questions. I've been noting them down. Hopefully I have all of them captured. And I'd like to read them in the order that they were asked in the chat. So we have 3 questions for Micah and Tisha first. The first question is, could you talk more about the relationship with the libraries and UNC Press? I'd love to hear more about how they are contributing to this project.
Sure. You mind if I take it, Tisha?
Go for it.
So I'm about to post a link in the chat. So the simple answer is that UNC Press established this office of scholarly publishing services in order to do exactly that, to provide some of the back-end services, workflow, tools, and infrastructure that a press does, but not necessarily publish things through the press. So for example, we worked with, I'll post another link here. We worked with them on a series of 5 engineering textbooks last summer, where the faculty member already had written the content. It was all sort of together already. So what the press provided was design. They have these great looking covers, copy editing, et cetera, et cetera. But the final product was then published by NC State. So we put the PDFs in our repository, and the agreement on the language is published by NC State in partnership with the UNC Press. So this textbook, this engineering textbook, is the first version of that bridge that we have with the press, where we're hopeful to bring them new and more things like Natalie's open curriculum and say, here's another thing, what would it look like to make this thing published? I think that will start to break their mold really quickly, which I'm excited about because they're a great press and I'm excited to work with them. But there's a lot of opportunity, especially from NC State, for different kinds of work to be published utilizing that framework, which I think leads really nicely into the next question about extension.
Yes, so can you talk about how OER's open curriculum could change the future of extension at a land-grant university?
Yeah, I'll start with this one. So a couple of the things. So Micah mentioned the UNC Press. Our cooperative extension already publishes stuff through them. And so these are all available for free for everyone to use online. So these are things like chemical manuals, tree guides, plant guides, all for the state of North Carolina. But you can also purchase them. So if you aren't from the state, but you want a hard copy, they sell them through UNC Press, which helps fund different parts of extension. And then so North Carolina is unique, and it's one of the first states that has extension offices across the whole state. We're also one of the few left that has an extension office in every county, including an additional one on the eastern band of the Cherokee Indian Reservation. So we have 101 extension offices across the state, and we have about 1,200 extension employees. And so having these OERs and open curriculums, it'll allow these people who are in areas that can't come to NC State or can't come to one of the 5 regional hubs within the state to still have access to these trainings and materials. There are several faculty who, Natalie is one of the people who's met with, that they needed a Python script that could be run so that way they could share their code more quickly, but also so it could be easier for them to use. And so Natalie's curriculum will help them figure out what types of scripts they are going to need to continue to share their data publicly, because that's one of the things, like most of us, extension is being asked to, what are you doing as an impact? And so knowing how to do these things from the open curriculums and the OERs are going to really help drive that home for all the stuff that they're already doing.
And the only thing I'll add to that point is that most of those publications, extension publications, would fall into the category of what we might call gray literature, and a lot of them, although they are published with and through UNC Press, aren't getting DOIs or some of those sort of characteristics or trappings of things that we would consider entering into the scholarly record. So utilizing Natalie's project as a bridge, kind of 2 ways to extension and the press, we could start to set up what like a shadow system of scholarly publishing of gray literature that looks scholarship-ish in the way that other scholarship does, but is really controlled and owned by the community published infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera.
And there's actually one more question for our NC State folks. Have you looked at service blueprinting as another model of tracking labor? We're thinking about using it at the University of Washington.
We haven't yet, but I've Googled the phrase and I'm pulling it up. I'd love to stay in touch. I think that was from Rele. Please get in touch.
Wonderful, and we do have a few questions for Shilpa as well. The first is, what IR platform or institutional repository platform does Rowan use?
We unfortunately use bpress. And that's something that I think we're going to stick with for a while. We currently do not have a developer on staff, and so it's a platform that we've made that has worked for us.
Another question, someone would love to know more about the topics you're covering in your workshop series. Are there core methods or topics that we're boiling down to for this work as it is established?
So for the Open Scholarship workshop, it's basically a broad overview of what Open Scholarship is. All the different concepts or terms as they fall under the larger Open Scholarship umbrella. So things like what is green and gold open access, what is open data, what is OER, for example. We gave a little bit of context about how the open access movement started and some of the impact of that, how the funding agencies are now requiring open access to be made as a requirement when sharing scholarship that they've funded. We share information about some of the open resources that are available at our institution, in addition to giving them, an idea for what some of the other openly available tools that are out there that they could also use in their research process. And then some of the implications for how open access or open scholarship are beneficial. So currently it's a very broad overview. We may do a deep dive into some of the tools or some of the other concepts out there. But that's what we've focused on right now. It's basically just raising awareness about some of these issues.
Great, thank you. Have you found that most faculty on campus are familiar with the term open scholarship? And if not, how have you worked to bridge that gap?
So some are and some are not, but I include, and I'm posting a link here, but there's a neat visual of open scholarship at this link, or what open science is or can include. And so I start off the workshop with this, just to give them an idea for how broad of a term this really is. And so, they're able to relate to something or the other, that might be mentioned in this visual.
And we have one more question for you. If anything has happened with the T&R committee, what has that work been like so far, and have you made any headway?
We have not gone that far yet. So the Open Scholarship discussion group has only met 3 times so far. So hopefully in the fall, we may be able to meet with that group. So I don't have anything on that as of now.
Fully understandable. Well, I would like to thank all of our speakers once again for some wonderful lightning talks that they've shared with us. We will be sending out the link to the recording to everyone who has registered for this virtual learning opportunity, and then we'll also make sure that it gets sent out to our discussion group list. I hope everyone is staying healthy, doing well given the current circumstances, and we will see you on the listserv.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks especially to Elois and Verletta and Brianna.
Yes, same here.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.